Kia ora, my name is Ted Whittaker. I'm a trustee of the ADA network, and I'm currently based in Te Whanganui-a-Tara Wellington, and my art practice I guess started in Dunedin, which is based on where this project that I'm going to talk about was held. So I went through the art school program there, and I guess this project's going to kind of talk about how my practice-led research was really formed by the city and formed by the surrounding makeup of its architecture and its spaces. So this opening slide that I've put up here is, I guess in a sense, a way to kind of locate the site and present a little bit of where we are in the world. This quite dark, gothic city in the south of New Zealand. And often it doesn't always look like this, but this is a particular flavour of day in Dunedin. That kind of, I guess, it brings with it the sense of severity in the climate, yeah, that paired with the architecture, which will inform, I think, the presentation. So I was really excited. Thank you, Awhi World, for inviting me onto this symposium and some of the prompts that were part of this invitation, which I think was a really nice chance for me to reflect on this project and through these lenses and ways of thinking. And so I'll just talk a little bit too about how this project itself arrived. So this is I'm going to talk today about storm channels. And it was a project that was co-presented by ADA, Aotearoa Digital Arts Network, and the Anti-Room, which is an artist-run space in Koputai, Port Chalmers. And this project, Storm Channels, it was, in a sense, a departure from, or a shift from ADA's previous projects, which were quite heavily academic in their delivery and in their symposia. So it would be often partnering with academic institutions to deliver quite formal presentations, but not exclusively as well. These symposia would often also consist of artworks, performances, and kind of flux between these institutional spaces and galleries and outdoor environments. I guess also part of, I think, the ADA kind of ideologies, which is kind of artworks that don't necessarily conventionally situate within conventional galleries, but can exist in whatever situation best suits the work. So this project, it was sort of a time where the organisation was, I don't think there were a few academics on the board of trustees, and we were kind of rethinking the kind of projects that we wanted to conduct and participate in. And this one kind of came out of, I guess, a relationship with the Dunedin environment and the kind of on the ground, in the soil, if you wish, artists that are working in a quite an independent way. So skip to the next slide. And this kind of this project, it was an invitation to 6 separate artist-run initiatives throughout Dunedin. So there's at any one given time in Dunedin, there seems to be a number of artist-run spaces in operation. So these are spaces that exist completely independently, often in people's homes or affordable spaces, studios, and again, kind of part of this Dunedin environment where there's this array of affordable and available spaces that communities tend to gravitate towards and don't wait around for institutions to support projects. These are projects that people feel an urgency to conduct a work, and they have the space and availability to do that. So this project was sort of celebrating these, at the time, 6 artist-run spaces that we'd identified over this one weekend in the middle of winter in Dunedin. And so I'm just at the moment showing screenshots of the project website. We built its own independent website that participants could go to, or people that were attending the event could identify where exactly these things were happening and who was involved. Because often these spaces are quite intimate. They exist in kind of partly a place of residence, they're quite private spaces. So it was kind of in a way about creating access to these quite important cultural spaces throughout Dunedin. So just go up there. So those 6 artist-run spaces that were involved were XXX, YYY, Dirt, The Manor, None, the Anteroom, and Savoy de Lacey. And I'll identify some of these spaces in their projects that they contributed throughout the presentation. And here's a map as well, just to situate where they physically are in the landscape. So those that have been to Dunedin you'll know that the Octagon is a central part of the city, and the majority of the spaces exist south of the Octagon. So in this often kind of a bleak urban environment, city environment, and sort of in between residential and industry. And then we've also located 2 of the other artist-run spaces at the time, Savoy de Lacey and the Anteroom on the West Harbour side. And this is just another image of some of the branding that was, or the visual identity for the project. So the posters and the website. And I guess at this point too, I just wanted to kind of mention the visual identity of the project and the name Storm Channels, and kind of also with reflection, a few years later, I was thinking about storms and channels and waterways and nature, and how these all these 6 different artist-run spaces intersect and are quite fluid in how they operate. And so that was kind of potentially a theme at the time, or maybe in reflection, but thinking about how organic these spaces are and how they are quite fluid, and how they might start up and then operate for a few years and then disappear or go into hibernation and then come back out again when there's energy, or when there's a sudden storm or rush of water. This is Dirt Gallery. This is where the event started. Over the weekend, so on the Friday night, there was a performance and launch event at this inner city artist-run space. In this project, they were showing a work by international artist. This was a collaboration with Chang Wen Ting, a project called Space Between. It was a multi-channel video installation talking about this abandoned sake factory, and ideas of space, place, ownership. And I'm just going to refer to my notes a bit. This is wanted to be quite an anecdotal presentation as well, and just I guess quite excited by some of the prompts that were given by Afi World, I guess just thinking a lot about about how these spaces come together, and what purposes do they serve, and how much they're really based around like a community that's operating at the time, and even these alternative realities and parallel worlds. So I guess this was something that I felt really leaned into the idea when you're talking about artist-run initiatives, because they do operate in these alternative realities, where this space that we're looking at here is, which was Dirt Gallery, that was less than a block away from the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, but it's lifted 2 floors up off the street. And in the sense, it's totally a hidden space. It's a private space. It's often quite hard to access, and but it exists in such close proximity to quite a public institution like the DPAG. So just sort of thinking about that as totally an inherent aspect of artist-run initiatives, is that they do just operate in this alternative world. Another, this is a more longer-running artist-run space at the time called None Gallery, or None, and this image here is just such a typical memory for me, attending like a number of gigs, exhibitions, the space on Stafford Street. And it was also a space where people would live. It was, I think, a multiple bedroom flat in a way, but it was multi-level, upstairs central level with gallery, kitchen, and then a basement, which also was not only art storage but performance spaces and the likes. And I'm just thinking back to some of these other prompts from Awhi World. And I guess there was an interesting prompt here on discussion of beauty, what is considered beautiful or true and alive. And I guess this space, Nun Gallery, I think it kind of would always flux and move in the same way, where there would be quite accessible visual art or sound works, but also quite severe and intense projects that were often known for its noise music. So questioning the idea of beauty was always quite a strong taste at this place. And these are some images of Brendan John Phillips' performance as part of Storm Channels. And also, thinking about the architecture of the spaces that these artists occupied. And this was a project that really leaned into that as well. This was another work that was part of the Nuns' contribution to the Storm Channels project, and it was making use of the elevator shaft that was no longer in use. So there was a bunch of springs and speakers and microphones set up that was also feeding through into the performance. This is another space that was also residential, the Manor, or Club 6. And for me, this space was really important to the cultural landscape of Dunedin, just in the way that it really identified as, I guess, a gap in availability of like a club scene, for example. There's not often a space where that can exist in Dunedin. So this flat, essentially, it really provided an environment where people could perform. You can see in both these slides more of a kind of a close listening afternoon program, but also a late night club performance. So really for me it was one of those moments where the landscape of Dunedin really, in this end of the world type geographical location, provided a space where people could really make their own realities and do their own thing when they felt that they needed to, and not have to wait around. And another component of the Storm Channels weekend then moved from the club night to the following day, which was a workshop held by Brett Ryan called Build Your Own Magnetti. And this is at the Anteroom in Port Chalmers. And this was not only a beautiful space to be in. The Anteroom, it's a former Masonic lodge and also a part residence and gallery. You can see the gorgeous blue light shining through into the space. This was an iconic blue window that was at the apex of the Masonic lodge. And the workshop involved multiple participants, led by Brett Ryan, to construct this object. And then following on for another project for the Storm Channels weekend, which was at Savoy de Lacy. And this is another really interesting artist-run space in the sense that it popped up on the main road between the city and Port Chalmers on Ravensbourne Road, for those that know that. And it was just, I think for the Dunedin city, it was just quite this strange, like, rubbernecking situation where you're driving down the road and like, what's this gallery doing? How did they pop up? What are they doing? What's it all about? So this was a really kind of amazing inclusion for the Storm Channels project, because it really, in a sense, was, although fitted in with the ARI concept, was quite unique, where the artist Watene quite recently moved to Otipoti, and this was their way of engaging with the art community, was through this independent artist-run space and studio. And finally, to close out this very dense weekend of works throughout artist-run spaces, was at YYY, with this ambient sound and visual piece up in a loft off Princess Street. And YYY were quite, I guess all of these spaces that there was a lot of crossover in the types of performances or works that they would present, but this one was much more of a softer ambient piece that would kind of send the guests off from the end of the weekend. So that's the sort of I guess the recap of what the Storm Channels project delivered over the 3 days. But I guess I just wanted to sort of hopefully explain through the process of these works, like how the artist-run spaces really provide such a crucial contribution to the art landscape in Otipoti. And I guess for me, growing up in the city as well, it was really a chance for one of those opportunities and moments where, thinking back to some of these themes and ideas that were presented through Awhi World, I guess the ideas of the questions of what is being cultivated, how do these spaces provide an area for arts practice to be cultivated and thriving as well, and also this question of what needs protection, because I think all but one of these spaces that are presented in this project are all defunct. I think the anteroom is the only one that is still in operation, and it's sort of this question where I'm like, I don't know whether it needs protection or whether it's just part of its natural ecosystem for spaces like this to operate at their own level. And the people that run them owe the public nothing. It's totally independent. It's up to them whether they want to provide these opportunities or not. And I think I guess it's almost like it's a momentary gift to the community as well, and that can often inspire others to start their own project spaces, which I think has totally happened. I think all of these spaces exist together and can inspire others to start their own. So I guess that sort of also brings to that point of what new life forms or materials are emerging from these ARIs, and I think it's totally that culture of independency and how the Dunedin art landscape operates. And I think that's I could talk also to sort of other methodologies like foraging and propagating. So I think there's a shared methodology of art practice throughout these artist-run spaces of sharing equipment and recycling and reusing old media. And often these spaces are so large in their floor print that they can afford to hold on to a lot of objects for a long period of time. But very much a shared network of art making.